Buongiorno allora a tutti coloro che partecipano a questo webinar dell'Associazione Antitrust Italiana. Io sono Alberto Pera e non Stefano Grassani che è qui accanto a me. Il tema di oggi è il caso Coty, la sentenza Coty della Corte di Giustizia. È una sentenza che è stata ampiamente commentata in vari casi, ma credo che la conversazione di oggi sia particolarmente interessante. Sarà una conversazione in inglese, quindi I switch to English. And I want to thank Professor Pitruzzella, the President of the Antitrust Authority, and Professor Andreas Lubberger, who is one of the extremely well-known lawyers in intellectual property and antitrust in Germany, but is also the external counsel of Coty in this case. There have been a lot of discussions about Coty, but I think that this webinar is particularly interesting because we have both an inside view from the external counsel of Coty and a view from above from the head of an antitrust authority and soon to be Advocate General of the European Court of Justice. I want to thank very much Professor Pitruzzella for being with us. I want to thank Professor Berger. I don't want to lose any more time, and so I would ask Professor Pitruzzella to come first, and then Andreas will go on with his presentation. Both of them as prepared presentations, and so we may be able to follow them in addition to hear them. With me is Stefano Grassani, which will manage the seminar. After the two presentations, there will be the possibility for posing questions, and we already have some colleagues who have prepared questions and will be willing to ask them to the speakers. Thank you very much indeed, and the floor is of Professor Pitruzzella.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you for this invitation, kind invitation. And in my speech, I will give only some general remarks, an introduction about the Coty case. I start saying that over the last years, the web has become a crucial channel for the distribution of goods and services. The growth of online markets has created enormous advantages for consumers and great changes in distributors' strategies. Some distribution networks see the internet as an opportunity, while others see the internet as a threat to their established business model. Suppliers of sophisticated goods have relied for decades on selective distribution as the cornerstone of their supply policies. Thus, it has been argued that internet and online sales have shaken selective distribution out of its comfort zone. In particular, suppliers fear that using third-party platforms like Amazon or eBay might have a negative impact on the product's image or on their quality, because customers cannot benefit from a special shopping experience, intensive customer service and care, and the aura of exclusivity. In Europe, some suppliers reacted to a challenge of online distribution by introducing an outright ban on sales via the internet, while other suppliers imposed an absolute ban on members of a selective distribution system to make use of third-party platforms. It is unquestionable the legality of a general ban of sales via the internet, especially after the ruling of the European Court of Justice in the Pierre Fabre dermocosmetic case. However, that judgment was based on the very specific facts of the case, involving an absolute ban on internet sales. Therefore, contractual clauses banning sales via third-party platforms remained controversial. Finally, such clauses have been challenged by some distributors and third-party platforms, fueling a debate as to whether an absolute ban on the use of a third-party platforms constitutes an anti-competitive restriction, and if so, whether such a restriction can be exempted. So far, the EU courts have not dealt with the issue of restriction of sales via third-party platforms within selective distribution systems until when the Frankfurt Court requested the European Court of Justice for a preliminary ruling. As we know, the ruling was issued in a dispute between Coty, a leading supplier of luxury cosmetics in Germany, and one of its authorized distributors. Coty sells luxury cosmetic products through a carefully organized selective distribution network throughout Europe. The distribution agreement contains the right for Coty to approve sales outlets based on a detailed range of quality requirements. The agreement prohibits the sale of products under a different name or to engage a third-party undertaking which has not been authorized. The Frankfurt Court asked essentially three questions. First, is a selective distribution system organized to protect a luxury image compatible with Article 101 of the treaty? If so, is a prohibition to engage third parties in a manner discernible to the customer for the purposes of internet sales compatible with Article 101, paragraph 1? And third, assuming such a prohibition includes a restriction of competition in the sense of Article 101, paragraph 1, does it constitute a hardcore violation under Article 4 of the vertical block exemption regulation? On 26 July of 2017, Advocate General Val delivered his opinion on the Coty case. According to his opinion, EU competition law allows selective distribution systems that are intended to preserve luxury image of a product to ban the use of third-party platforms if the three standards conditions established by the European Court of Justice case law are met. On December 2017, in line with Advocate General Val's opinion, in its judgment of 6 December 2017, the Court of Justice ruled that a selective distribution system for luxury goods designed primarily to preserve the luxury image of those goods complies with Article 101, paragraph 1 of the treaty, provided that the resellers are chosen on the basis of objective criteria of a qualitative nature that are laid down uniformly for all potential resellers and applied in a non-discriminatory fashion, and that the criteria laid down do not go beyond what is necessary. There are the so-called metro criteria. Such a ban can be proportionate to the goal of preserving the luxury image of goods. The court requires a case-by-case assessment of these clauses. Such a contractual clause does not infringe Article 101 on condition that has the objective of preserving the luxury image of those goods, that it is laid down uniformly and not applied in a discriminatory fashion, and that it is proportionate in the light of the objective pursued. In particular, we can say that the Coty ruling contains three main findings, all of which will be very important for the future analysis. First, the Coty judgment provides an opportunity for the European Court of Justice to clarify its earlier Pierre Fabre ruling. In Pierre Fabre, the court reiterated that the organization of a selective distribution network is not prohibited by Article 101 and recalled the two main criteria. First, distributors are chosen on the basis of objective criteria of a qualitative nature laid down uniformly for all potential resellers, and these criteria are applied in a non-discriminatory manner. And second, the characteristics of the product in question necessitate such a network to preserve quality and ensure proper use, and the criteria do not go beyond what is necessary to do so. Second, the European Court of Justice then moves on to consider specifically the clause prohibiting third-party online platform sales and confirms that this clause designed to protect the image of luxury goods, which prohibits resellers from using in a discernible manner third-party online platforms for the internet sale of luxury goods, does not infringe Article 101. With regard to the first requirement, the European Court of Justice observes that the referring court already recognized that the clause is applied in an objective and uniform manner without discrimination to all authorized distributors. In this context, it will be particularly important for the brand manufacturer not to sell products via third-party online platforms and not to allow such sales elsewhere in its distribution system. Otherwise, it will not be possible to maintain a prohibition of sales via third-party online platforms. The European Court of Justice also considers that the clause is necessary, appropriate, and proportionate for the preservation of the image of Coty's luxury goods. The European Court of Justice considers that the clause ensures that the products are sold only by the authorized distributors. With regard to proportionality, the European Court of Justice highlights that the clause does not contain an absolute prohibition of online sales because the prohibition only refers to the internet sales of the contract goods via third-party platforms which operate in a discernible manner towards consumers. Authorized distributors remain, in fact, free to sell through their own websites if they have an electronic shop window for the authorized store. They can also use unauthorized third-party platforms, provided that the third-party provider involved is not discernible to the consumers, which means that consumers are not aware that a third-party platform is being used and remains in the environment that meets the distributor's quality standards. Third, given this finding, it would not have been necessary, according to the Court of Justice, to discuss the remaining question of whether a third-party online platform ban can be considered as a hardcore restriction. The European Court of Justice ruling fully aligns to the position of the European Commission. In particular, the ruling confirms the principles contained in the guidelines on vertical restraints. As the Commission has indicated in paragraph 54 of its guidelines, suppliers may require quality standards on resellers for use of the internet or third-party online platforms, including the requirement to have a brick-and-mortar shops. The judgment is also in line with the Commission's position in the final report of the e-commerce sector inquiry, where the Commission confirmed its view that marketplace ban do not constitute a hardcore restriction, so can benefit from the block exemption regulation, as they do not in practice amount to an absolute ban on online sales. I want to add that in a preliminary comment on the Coty judgment, the German federal German federal president of the cartel office stated, "At first glance, we see only limited effects on our decisional practice, noting that the judgment relates to luxury products. The German authorities' initial view is therefore that its case law, which relates to a wider selection of goods, such as branded sporting and leisure goods, remains unaffected by the Court of Justice judgment." The European Court of Justice judgment in the Coty case brings more clarity regarding rules on online sales and in general to the approach and evaluation of vertical restriction, but it is still questionable how it will be implemented in the different member states, especially if we take in consideration this statement of the chairman of the German Federal Cartel Office. So I think that the story is intended, and the competition authorities all over Europe will be still engaged in these issues. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, shall I jump in right away? Yes. Thank you for this entry. I will now go a little bit more from the practical side, which was our interest in what to take home, probably from the Coty judgment, and what are the remaining problems. In that regard, I think we have the same structure. I will start with two teachings on luxury. The first one is very easy to take home. No longer concerns about Pierre Fabre. We had a big discussion in Germany on the impact of this judgment. And of course, I think everyone in the brand industry is happy that Pierre Fabre is put back to the single case approach. Then there's something which we find in earlier rulings on selective distribution as well. This is the approach of the General Court in 1996, which has had to rule on the individual exemption of the Yves Saint Laurent and Givenchy distribution systems. And in those two rulings, the General Court already developed the approach that luxury goods are in need for selective distribution, in particular because selective distribution is the bracket open only bracket closed means to establish an environment which suits to the luxury character of the goods. And this approach has now been accepted and taken by the Court of Justice, and of course explained much more deeply and convincing, I think. Then we have also two teachings on platform bans. The first one is, I think, very interesting because in our case in Germany, we were not discussing platforms as such. Platforms can have a broad variety of appearances, and sometimes we have niche platforms which focus on certain products. So I would be very cautious to talk about platforms as such. but in our case it was Amazon, and Amazon, of course, is the role model for platforms of all kinds of goods, and there we have a take-home that such platforms which offer all kinds of goods for sale do not suit for the luxury goods. They are not an appropriate environment because they don't underline the exclusivity of such goods. Then there is a more technical argument, and this argument is new. This argument had been introduced very lately. We had used it as well, but not in this specific way. But in the oral hearing before the court, we had Sweden coming in, and Sweden was using this one and only argument that in a selective distribution system, the operator of the system must have control about the environment and about the appearance of the goods on the point of sale, and this can only be done by a contractual control. And because in the absence of such a control, platforms are not suitable for the sale of selective goods. And it is an easy argument, but I think this is one of the arguments which we will have in discussion later on about, because this argument is not, it's in no way restricted to luxury goods. This argument is a uniform argument that applies to any kinds of platforms which have no no contractual relationship with the operator of the distribution system. Then we have two teachings on the black clauses of the vertical restraints block exemption regulation. The first one that was foreseeable is about Article 4b, which prohibits the separation of customers or territories. And in this regard, it is clear that customers of a platform are not separable from other internet customers, as usually those customers also use other tools and other means to undertake online purchases. The second one was much more tricky. I think the 4B answer was to be expected. The 4C answer, I was particularly concerned about this point because we have a wording in Article 4C. If you really take it serious, it is for operators of a selective distribution system. This provision does not allow to impose any restrictions on active and passive sales. So the only restriction which is permissible under this clause is the restriction on the sales of the authorized shop, and that's it. So the wording, I tell it terrible. It was going much too far, and we mentioned this in our submission to the court, but the court did not discuss this particular wording in Article 4C. It simply gave some guidance on how to escape it. And the first is, of course, you should not try to prohibit internet sales as such. And the second is, you should better not try to restrict online advertising as such, which opens the question, what is there further leeway to probably give qualitative criteria on advertising? Then I would like to come to two disappointments of this judgment, which I think is always praised, but I must admit that to a certain extent I was disappointed. The first one is that we could have had a legal teaching on a more abstract level, which the court missed to provide. Of course, platform bans is one issue, but there is some discussion with the Commission, with the European Parliament in general about the relationship between selective distribution and the online industry. And one might have expected that the court was trying to draw a more general line between these two a little bit colliding industries. And in particular, then I think we can note that we have a problem with online sales also because since 1999, from the first BER, there is a knowledge that internet sales are coming up, that internet sales will be an issue of vertical restraints, and the block exemption regulation is silent to that. This is one problem, I think, which causes the diverse approaches of the national competition authorities, that the regulation, which is, I think, the instrument for the Commission to communicate to the member states, is silent about online sales. I think this is something which we will have to discuss in 2022 or prior to that. And the court has missed the chance to give some guidance on that. And of course, also the guidelines from the Commission are based on a very questionable approach in that the Commission as a basis takes the view that internet sales are passive sales. But the distinction between active and passive sales is coming from the evaluation of exclusive sales agreements, and this does not really fit. And for example, if you take it and try to test this in practice, you will see that everyone who tries to do only passive internet sales will sell nothing. So necessarily, internet sales have to be active to be successful. And then we have a kind of revival of the product type approach, which I think is not the best way to explain selective distribution, because everyone can have different views whether or not a certain kind of product is requiring selective distribution. And if I look into Germany and into the ASICS discussion, of course, yeah, you can say this is a sports good, it's not luxury, but you can and then you can say it is not there is no entry into selective distribution. And on the other hand, one can take the approach that far beyond the luxury argument, there are reasons for ASICS to have a selective distribution system. So this question is open, and I share the view of Mr. Pitruzzella that within the member states we will have an ongoing discussion on that. Then if you go to the opinion of the General Attorney, Mr. Wahl, the court has also failed to grab two of the arguments from Mr. Wahl, and the one argument is to put selective distribution into a much broader frame of competitive theory, and to try to balance the downsides with the advantages of selective distribution. Again, there's also some discussion on the relationship between trademark law and competition law, which is completely out of discussion in the court's decision. We have tried to enforce this argument. Then two remarks just to draw your attention to questions which may follow as well. The first is that in Pierre Fabre, the court has addressed selective distribution systems as a restriction by object, and now with bringing Pierre Fabre back to its very case, the question is whether or not this approach vis-à-vis selective distribution system has been silently abandoned. I think this is the case, but it's open. And then there is also a reference now to the Compatior ruling, which is a trademark ruling. And there are some side remarks to selective distribution, but now we have to take this ruling as guidance for selective distribution as well. And this raises in particular the question whether or not the right of the trademark proprietor to bring goods first to the market is also something to justify selective distribution. Finally, I just want to let you know that we have an ongoing discussion in Germany, particularly. First of all, I believe that the court in Frankfurt, the referring court, has nothing left to decide. Astonishingly, the European Court has discussed the Coty clauses in detail. But we will have a problem with the most of our German brands. I know it from some very famous German brands that they really want to present their brands not as luxury brands. For example, Leica or Porsche, they don't try to be luxury. So what with those brands? And of course, again, the question is how will the German FCO react to it? And also, what will be the impact of the internet market structure? That is the final and probably very big issue here, because Amazon has a dominant market position, and the president of the FCO, he argues that platforms are important for medium and small sellers to make use of the internet. Without Amazon, they will not be able to do internet sales. And this is a question which will be discussed with regard to the outcome of the sector inquiry. And I think this will give us some food for discussion in the next years as well. Yes, and then I have a very short summary for you, just one easy to take home. If you please would change to the final slide, and then I can stop.
Okay.
Who is operating the slides?
It's me, Andreas.
Okay, can you go to the last slide? I will come now to my very easy and popular summary. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. See. Thank you very much. We now have a few questions, and we have already 3 designated speakers for submitting these 3 questions. If anyone else of the audience would like to pose a question, there is a reference, there's a section in the lower bottom of the screen called Domande. If you click into that section, you can write your questions, and we'll select those questions and submit it to the panelists. In any event, the slides of the presentations will be shown in the website of the association. Now, the first speaker who will submit a brief comment and a question is Francesco Anglani, which let's see if we're now able to put on the...
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Francesco, yes.
That's good. Thanks a lot to both the speakers for their very clear and interesting speeches. I simply have a question. As we know, the Coty judgment focuses its analysis on selective distribution system of luxury products. In this scenario, and in light of the conclusion reached by the European Commission in the final report of the sector inquiry, where the Commission said that marketplaces bans should not be considered as hardcore restriction within the meaning of Article 4 of the block exemption regulation, what in your view will be the impact of the Coty judgment on the assessment of marketplaces ban imposed for non-luxury products and for luxury products that are not distributed within a selective distribution system. Thank you.
Who's going to start?
Andreas.
Okay. I think
not to give which will be the position of my authority, because we will have some discussion inside the authority on the cases, so I can't for the moment show which will be our decision in the future, of course.
Of course.
So Andreas will give the answer.
Okay. I think there will, of course, be guidance simply because it is the CJEU, and we have a clear guidance, at least with regard to luxury and with regard to selective distribution. If these two factors appear, I think we have a clear guidance. But with those who don't operate selective distribution but who have a luxury brand, they can at least refer to the argument that this environment does not fit for their brand. And the question is whether or not this will stand strong. We in Germany have some separable rules in our national antitrust law which would apply then and which would help then, but I don't know about the Italian antitrust law, whether this would be helpful in Italy. But they would I would say in a nutshell, they will benefit as well. Those who are not having luxury brands and who are not operating selective distribution, they really have still an uphill battle to judge platform bans. And I note in Germany that many companies are now starting to operate selective distribution, while in the past they have simply sold their goods.
Alberto, sorry. Now, Alberto?
Yeah.
Yes, but now I have to go because now I have an institutional meeting in my agency. So
okay.
Thank you very much, especially to Professor Andreas Lubberger. It has been for us very useful to listen to you, and I hope to meet you in a direct relationship. Thank you very much.
Me too, yes.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed. It was a very interesting...
Thank you to you, and congratulations for all your initiatives, which are very important for the antitrust community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We continue then with Andreas and the other questions.
Okay, Andreas, the second question is being submitted by Vito Auricchio. Vito, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I hear you.
So good afternoon to everyone. The second question refers to the to an aspect which I think was already touched by Mr. Lubberger presentation. We have seen in the recent years a certain difference in the approach in the member states vis-a-vis the bans on third-party platforms, and of course Germany has been an important player in this enforcement policy, and we see more stricter approaches in some member states rather than others. How do you think that the Coty judgment will impact on this? Do you think it will help in reducing the differences, or do you think there will still be room for different enforcement approaches across Europe? Because I think this is still a point which might be relevant for companies that have a EU-wide selective distribution system?
I would first of all share the analysis of Mr. Pitruzzella that the Coty judgment, and this applies for all member states, will result in a better understanding of the role of platforms. I think we will, in the wake of this judgment, take a closer look on platforms, because it is clear that there are kinds of platforms which cannot be banned. For example, a platform that works only as a technical provider in the background, which leaves for the retailer the opportunity to design its shop individually and to present an assortment of goods, not only one. Those platforms which allow a shop in the shop system, I think they cannot be banned because they can align to selective distribution. So this teaching that we have to have a closer look on platforms will certainly apply in all member states. Then we also have a teaching from the sector inquiry, and this is, you mentioned this, that the sector inquiry plays a role, and we had a discussion on the impact in the oral hearing as well. We have information, if you look at paragraph 449, there is a reference to information provided by the internet industry, and according to this information, a majority of small and medium-sized retailers have a need for platforms to do internet sales. But if you look closely at those figures, you will find that this figure quotes retailers which generate an annual sales volume of not more than 50,000 euros. And these are particular small retailers. And my personal view is that this is completely separate from selective distribution. No brand will accept a dealer as a representative of the brand, who generates not more than 50,000 euros overall with all his goods. So I think if we get some support for selective distribution from the sector inquiry, that is also new, and that will also apply in all member countries. And then there's a question, of course, we in Germany, we had this political support of the online industry. We were very surprised by it. And thanks again to Italy and some other member states who supported Coty. But I think these political differences have not disappeared, and they will show up again.
Okay. Thanks, Vito. Andreas, the third question is being posed by Andrea Cicala.
Yeah. Good morning, and very interesting elements. I think that everyone is agreeing that there will be many things. I want to say that, like Perfab Coty, maybe will open the way, maybe, yeah, to some other cases. But I have a question relating to two aspects that goes to the additional elements considered by the court. The court, in assessing the legitimacy of Coty system, they considered that dealers were not restricted under certain conditions to advertise on third-party platform, and were not restricted to use online engine search. And they clearly say that in light also of this situation, customer, it might be expected that customer would have been able to find the offer of the dealers. That if you want is the other way to say that this dealer would have been able to promote and effectively present their offer to the market. This was one of the concern of the objection made by FCO. And so I wonder which can be the undergoing impact of this statement, if you see that there might be, if this statement might determine an influence in the way the agencies may consider, in general, restriction on online advertising. Online restriction not linked to quality or absolute restriction. And whether you think that these paragraph in the Coty case may, in a way, provide more ground to the position of the Commission about the use of price comparison tool, because they expressly say in the report that this restriction can be admitted when there are quality issues to be maintained, but otherwise there is a negative assessment, especially because the use of price comparison tool has been considered a way for dealer to get visibility. So do you think that this paragraph 64 in the Coty case may produce some influence in the reasoning of agency in assessing this kind of restrictions?
Yes, I agree. There is some teaching about search engines and also price comparison engines, and it is very clear that you cannot ban those instruments as such. You will, once you do it, I think you have collusion with Article 4C of the block exemption. And probably this will also be treated as a hardcore restriction. I don't know, but it is in the air. But the question is, can an operator of selective distribution impose quality criteria on the web advertising? And I think, yes, he can, because we already have rules on the quality of search engine advertising that follow from the court case law on search engines. This is, for example, Porter Cabin. You have some advice on how to use or not use a search engine to respect the trademark rights of the respective owner. And then, particularly with regard to price comparison engines, we have the problem in Europe that the internet is the open door for counterfeits. And Europe is suffering, is the area in the world which is suffering most from counterfeits. So I think one can clearly tell retailers, of course you can use price comparison engines, but please avoid those which have no tools and don't care about pages which offer counterfeits and are known for counterfeits offers. I think this will come up very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you, Andrea. We don't have any more questions, so in about 50 minutes, we have discussed a lot of the Coty judgment. We have seen the development and also the perspectives. I think it's a very promising field and gives us a lot of indications, also opens to a lot of issues, as we have seen, not only in the selective distribution field. It is interesting because the first webinar we had was about Intel, which was about the rule of reason approach to abuse of dominance. Now we have Coty, which is a rule of reason approach to selective distribution and vertical relation. And so I think there is a stream of thought which we may see in future decisions. It has been a very interesting discussion. I thank Andreas, I thank Professor Pitruzzella, I thank Francesco, Vito, and Andrea, and obviously Stefano, who has been the organizer and also put us in contact with Andreas, so I thank him very much. There have been 77 people 77 points of consultation, which means that there were many more experts involved. So this is a successful result. I thank you very much. Just before ending, since the activity of the Associazione Antitrust Italiana never ends, I just want to announce to give you a primer. On the 30th of January, we'll have in Rome at the Autorità, Garante, della Concorrenza, a conference on the relation between Italian and European merger control, with the Deputy Director of the DG Comp and the Secretary General of the Authority, the President of the Authority, which will conclude, and a number of experts, economists, and people from the institution. So I think it will be another interesting event. Thank you very much for all those who attended. Thank you again for those who presented their views. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.